Everybody to this month's Local Heritage Talk, and this month we're going to have a look at some of the minerals that are found in the Shoalhaven, and we might start off just by saying there's gold in them there hills. There's gold in a lot of hills around Australia actually. Gold in Australia was officially discovered on February the 15th, 1823 at Fish River, located between Ryedale and Bathurst. Then, in 1839, Paul Edmund Strzelecki discovered small amounts of gold in silicate at the Vale of Clyde near Hartley, and in 1841, Reverend W.B. Clark found gold on the Cox's River, both locations on the road to Bathurst. The finds were suppressed by the colonial government to avoid a likely dislocation of the relatively small community. It was feared that the convicts and free settlers would leave their assigned work locations to rush to the new finds to seek their fortunes, in particular damaging the new pastoral industry. Reportedly, Governor George Gipps said to Clark when he exhibited his gold, "Put it away, Mr. Clark, or we shall all have our throats cut." These concerns were not unfounded. The Californian gold rush started in 1848, and immediately people began to leave Australia for California. To stem the exodus, the New South Wales colonial government decided to alter its position and encourage the search for payable gold. In 1849, the colonial government sought approval of the Colonial Office in England to allow the exploitation of the mineral resources of New South Wales. A geologist was requested, and this led to the appointment of Samuel Suchberry. A reward was offered for the first person to find payable gold. The discovery of gold was the discovery that changed a nation. 28 years after the Fish River discovery, a man named Edward Hargraves discovered a grain of gold in a billabong near Bathurst in 1851. The find was proclaimed on the 14th of May, and within days the first Australian gold rush began, with 100 diggers searching for their gold. By June, there were over 2,000 people digging around Bathurst, and thousands more were on the way. The Great Western Road to Bathurst became choked with men from all walks of life, with all they could carry to live and mine. The newspaper, Bathurst Free Press, reported on the 17th of May, 1851, "A complete mental madness appears to have seized almost every member of the community. There has been a universal rush to the diggings." 10 years after the start of the gold rush in 1851, the population of New South Wales had grown from 200,000 to 357,000 people, an increase of 78%. Early in the 1870s, the Shoalhaven's main goldfield opened up at Yalwal. 25 kilometres west of Nowra, the field was situated at the junction of the Dangira and Yarramunmun creeks, which join the Shoalhaven River a few kilometres east of the junction of the Shoalhaven and Kangaroo rivers. The Yalwal strike was rather late on the scene, but the possibilities of gold at Yalwal had been recognised early on. The ruggedness and inaccessibility of the country west of Burrier discouraged European exploration and occupation until the early to mid-1830s. It was in 1833 that the surveyor Francis Rusden surveyed the Ettrimer region north of Pigeon House Mountain, and it is likely that Yalwal and Dangira creeks were surveyed in this period too. Certainly, an 1837 map of New South Wales by surveyor Robert Dixon depicts the two watercourses in some detail, indicating that they had been examined and surveyed by this time. The Commissioner of Crown Lands for the County of St Vincent, A.K. Mackay, was struck by the similarity of the countryside to the Turon goldfield near Bathurst, and he tried, around 1852, to interest some of the locals in the possibility. The geologist W.B. Clark, that's him there with that nice bushy, trendy beard, recognised the possibilities of the Yalwal field and reported them in his Southern Goldfields paper. I do not doubt that there is some gold to yet be found in the ravines and all along the broken country between the mouth of the Yalwal Creek and the head of the Mongalo River. Clark also predicted that gold would be won from the hillsides, but that it will require the processes of science for the extraction of the metal. How true this proved to be. The earliest recorded prospecting was carried out in 1870. Messrs J. Sievewright, J. Breakwell and S. Donovan worked alluvial deposits along the Dangira, just above its junction with the Yarramunmun. They had 107 metres of sluice boxes operating, which were unfortunately destroyed in the 1871 flood. Still, this proved no deterrent. Over the next 30 years, some 8 claims were worked, with over, by today's values, $6.5 million worth of gold being extracted. Anyone could, and still can, go panning for alluvial gold found in the riverbanks and bed. Buried in silts and clays and light shales, the precious metal has to be separated. There are a variety of methods employed to achieve this, the most common of these being the previously mentioned sluice and the cradle. The alluvial ore is shovelled onto the machine and the clays, etc., are dispersed with water. A last small separation is achieved by panning. When diggers collect the gold that was too fine to pan, they would use a method called tinning. This involved rubbing mercury in their pans to trap the gold. The digger then placed his pan in the fire to melt the resulting amalgam, which would then be placed in a hollowed-out potato, wired together, and thrown into the fire. The spud would be cooked until it was black on the outside. At this point, the mercury was absorbed by the potato, leaving the pure gold inside. Reef gold is embedded in quartz rock, which has to be crushed to release the gold caught in the seams. After crushing, the ore goes through a screen with the assistance of water and runs over a flat area that is treated with, firstly, copper sheet, cyanide paste, and then mercury. Mercury has a chemical affinity with gold, silver, and other metals. As the processed ore runs over this area, the gold attaches itself to the mercury, with the rest of the ore passing through the tailings dump. Eventually the cyanide, mercury and gold are scraped up and placed in a retort, where the mixture is heated until the cyanide and mercury evaporate off and are recycled, leaving the gold behind. The cyanide paste acts as a buffer so that the scrapings of copper do not contaminate the separated gold. The extraction is a dirty process, often doing environmental damage and causing lung damage and deafness to the workers, as well as the dangers of mercury and cyanide poisoning. So you really have to want that gold. And they did. 2 years after John Henry Sievewright first found alluvial gold in Dangira Creek, he achieved hard-won success at the first formal claim site known as Pinnacle. This prompted others to search, and in 1872 Messrs Aldous and Cadell discovered gold in surface stone on what would become the Pioneer Claim. By 1873, various parties had taken out mining leases to a total of 69 acres in the Yalwal area. Among them were the Homeward Bound, Eclipse, Golden Crown, Golden Quarry, Poor Man, Star, Caledonian and Sawpit Gully claims. A mixture there of, woohoo, we're going to strike it rich and I really don't know why I'm doing this. From the outset, a number of interrelated factors, including a slowness to understand the character of the local ore-bearing body, Yalwal's inaccessibility, insufficient development capital, and a lack of mining expertise, hampered the productivity of the Yalwal field. It became clear at a very early stage that the quality of the Yalwal ore-bearing stone was quite variable. It was to be many years before the Yalwal miners fully understood this and appreciated its implications. Indeed, towards the end of the goldfield's life, many mines were being open cut to access the gold-bearing quartz. Access to Yalwal depended on negotiation of the bush track from Burrier. Even for someone on horseback, this was an extremely rough track. The descent from the gap into Yalwal was so steep that teamsters bringing bullock wagons into the valley were forced at one section to lower the wagons down on ropes. The Shoalhaven News of June the 14th, 1873 reported, "The route to Yalwal is anything but a pleasant one, over sandstone ridges and along sidelings, over rotten patches of ground where a horse may be at any time bogged without a moment's notice. At last the gap is reached, a cleft in the sandstone mountain, and to reach the valley a precipitous hill has to be descended." Actually, the narrow road wound down the side of the mountain with no safety fences until it reached a ridge down which it was taken, with steep drops and dense tall timber on either side, until the floor of the valley was reached. The gap could not be avoided. 3 routes to the goldfields had been considered from Nowra and Torera, but all ended at the gap. Deviation of the gap was again considered in 1899, but considered too costly to construct. While the track to Yalwal made it difficult to bring in suitable machinery, the mining parties operating in the area in the early days were so undercapitalised that they could not afford in any case to purchase proper equipment. This shortage of capital was a direct consequence of the character of the field in its early years. Typically, the leaseholders were local Shoalhaven residents, most of them farmers. For them, mining was a secondary activity to be undertaken as they wished or were able. Between 1882 and 1900, the Homeward Bound mine produced 24,000 ounces of gold. Mining continued at a number of other sites, but workings declined after 1900, finally being abandoned in 1938. The Shoalhaven also has its gold legends, in this case Billy Blue. Billy had been seen in towns from Nerriga to Wollongong, but most of the stories centre on his visits to Torera to exchange his gold for supplies. While there are no official records to be found, there are ample references to Billy and his gold in contemporary newspapers. As recently as 2018, the South Coast Register featured a story about Billy Blue. Billy Blue is a 19th century legendary character from the Shoalhaven. An Indigenous man, Billy Blue was said to have been the king of his tribe on the Marulan side of the Shoalhaven River. He made trips to Torera and paid his way with nuggets of gold, the source of which created much interest. The name of Billy Blue is a mystery, as it does not appear in official documents such as a census of muster. Some Indigenous people adopted the names of the Europeans they worked for, and it is possible Billy Blue took the name of a character who lived in the rocks up until his death in 1834. According to the article written by Bill Morton for the South Coast Register's Back to Shoalhaven Week, in 1926, the Billy Blue of the district was known to Nowra's first mayor, Henry Moss. Well before he became involved in local government, Moss during the 1850s explored many parts of the district and had an interest in geology. Moss is said to have had the confidence of Blue, and there was a perception in the community that he knew the location of the gold source. There are other suggestions, with one record stating, in the course of his wanderings along the Shoalhaven, he, Blue, occasionally obtained fair specimens from potholes when the river was low. He stored his findings in a pickle bottle and carried the gold either to Marulan or Nowra. Alf Dare, a saddler and bushman with an interest in history, a little later wrote about the legend in articles for the Shoalhaven and Nowra News that was published in 4 issues in 1939. As a young man living at Camberwarra, his neighbour Charlie Moffat had a fascination for Billy Blue's reef, and so engaged a clairvoyant, Madam Wallace, to help him find it. She asserted that Blue used to get his gold over the cliff in a wet, marshy place, and gave various other clues to satisfy Moffat's inquiring mind. With this knowledge, Moffat, with Jim Flannery, Errol Lumsden, Jim and Alf Dare, went on several expeditions to search for the reef, taking with them provisions on their pack horses. On one trip, Alf found evidence of tomahawk marks on the tree, of the type that Madam Wallace had mentioned would lead to the reef. However, the search proved fruitless. Many years later, Alf shared a campfire on the Jervis Bay Road with a man named John Roach. He claimed to have found the reef and gleaned £450 worth of gold from it. Whether the story is true is anyone's guess. So many people know that gold was discovered and mined at Yalwal. It may come as a surprise, however, to learn that during 1904, silver, copper, tin, lead and zinc ores were discovered at Tolwan on the western edge of Moreton National Park, and Tolwan Mining Company was active there until its liquidation in 1912. The Tolwan copper, tin, arsenic deposits were discovered by our aforementioned friend John Sivrite as he exposed outcrops in the eastern tributary of the Shoalhaven Gorge. Being narrow, rich lodes, these deposits represented the style of mineralisation favourable for the low capital, labour-intensive type of copper-tin mining of the early part of the 20th century. In 1907, the the Tolwong Mineral Company was formed to exploit the deposits for arsenic, copper and tin. Between 1907 and 1909, the main Tolwong lode was explored and opened up by numerous small workings, underlay shafts and several interconnected tunnels. In a report to the directors of the company in 1909, J.V. Vale painted a highly optimistic picture of the deposit and its future. He concluded, "The property as it now stands is a highly payable one, from which heavy dividends can be expected, but the possibilities are so great that I would hardly care to venture an opinion as to the future developments. I can only say that I have never inspected or seen a property that shows such great promise." That's what they were getting excited about. I don't know. Difficulties with the steep terrain were overcome by using two aerial tramways, one from the top of the Shoalhaven Gorge to a treatment plant 520 metres below on the opposite side of the river, and a second designed to transport ore from the mines high up the tributary Tolwong Gorge to the plant. Ore production commenced in 1910, and at this stage the average number of men employed at the site was 60. The miners were working 3 shifts a day, and a small tent settlement was established around the works. Production from the Tolwong mines continued sporadically until June 1912, when the Tolwong Mineral Company went into liquidation. Since then, several companies, including Placer Prospecting Proprietary Limited in the mid-1960s and the Broken Hill Proprietary Company in 1971, aka BHP, have assessed the prospectivity of the Tolwong lodes and surrounding area. The size and style of the known mineralisations have been considered unsuitable for large-scale modern mining. Thank goodness. This opinion would also appear to run true for other mineral deposits found in the area. During 1907, lodes of zinc, copper, tin, lead and arsenic sulfides were discovered in Jones Creek Gorge, along with a deposit of silver ore. The silver deposit was worked to some extent, but was said to be a complex ore, very difficult to treat under then existing methods. This led to the establishment of the Etra mines, which extracted, but did not treat, the various ores between 1908 and 1914. The ore, of a complex character and situated in such an inaccessible location, did not lead to the expected development of the area, although Jones Creek Gorge was excluded from the gazettal of the Moreton National Park. Finally, for today, mining for silica seems to have begun at Flint Point around 1917, the rock being broken up manually, carried to Ulladulla by cart and shipped to the Newbold Silica Firebrick Company at Newcastle. When the easiest one material was worked out, operations were transferred to other sites and loading for shipment was made from a jetty constructed on the north side of Bannister's Point, reached by a railway running on hardwood rails. After mining began at Patimore's Lagoon, the railway was continued over the Narrawalli Inlet, and then for another 5 kilometres just short of the Lake Conjola settlement. It's believed at least 3 locomotives were used at different times. The Bannister's Point location had storage facilities, a crusher and various workshops. It remained in use until 1943, when operations were transferred to Redhead, where the loading facilities had been constructed in 1924. This continued until 1947, when one crusher was removed to Yatta Yatta and the ore transported by road. Both loading jetties were demolished later because the structures had become dangerous, that at Bannister's Point in 1961 and the Redhead Jetty in 1968. Mining continued until 1975, when the Pattimore Quarry was considered worked out. Gold mining in the Shoalhaven was intense but short-lived, with the main activity lasting from the 1870s to around the 1900s. 2 events brought mining to a halt at Yalwal in the late 1930s. The first was a devastating bushfire that ripped through the valley and what was left of the town on Black Saturday, 14th of January 1939. The second event that put paid to mining was the outbreak of World War II in September 1939. Great numbers of men left their civilian occupations to enlist in the services. There was little labour available and not much incentive either to continue mining operations at Yalwal. Mining of minerals further west was never a success due to the low economic yields and the insurmountable terrain. Finally, the Shoalhaven Shire Council finished construction of the Dangira Dam, which flooded most of the former town site and lower mines in 1972. Oops, I missed some slides. That's Redhead. We've got a huge collection of photos from Redhead that we got donated about 5 years ago, which is great. That's the railway. And now we'll go back to where we were. So yes, we constructed a dam that flooded most of the former town site and lower mines in 1972. All that remain of the settlement now are the graveyard and mine workings in the surrounding area. Some mine shafts and other diggings, the graveyard and a stamping battery can still be seen. Of the 35 or so mine workings accessible by foot or canoe, some are safe enough for a young child to walk and climb through, whilst others are extremely dangerous. If in doubt, don't enter. The main mine workings are about 15 minutes walk from the car park and can entertain the entire day. Now, I referred to an early account of Billy Blue's reef. It's quite interesting, so I'm going to finish off by reading that to you. The Lure of Shoalhaven Gold, the true story of Billy Blue's reef. And this is written by a tame journalist. I don't know what a wild journalist looks like, but this guy's a tame journalist. The story of Billy Blue's reef is an epic story of an El Dorado that never existed. The talc of an outcrop of pure gold, alleged to exist somewhere in the gorges of the Shoalhaven, has been told the world over. The writer has heard it in drovers' camps, where sheepmen congregate, by bivouac fires beneath the shadows of the Sphinx, and in the forecastle during the watch below. The whole matter is easy of explanation. Billy Blue was just the ordinary monkey-cunning aboriginal. Please bear in mind this was written back in 1939. And in the course of his wanderings along the Shoalhaven, he occasionally obtained fair specimens from potholes when the river was low. He stored his findings in a pickle bottle, and the whites did the rest, creating an El Dorado that was not. When the truth of the situation dawned on Blue, he naturally enough assumed an air of stolid mystery, accepting meanwhile all the libations of rum and contributions of cash that were lavished on him, all in the vain hope that he would disclose the whereabouts of the reef. For liquid and monetary consideration, Billy would consent to lead an expedition. Such an expedition would set out in good order, only to find that friend Billy was missing from the first night's camp. Theories were advanced from time to time, only to be exploded when put into practice. A blazed tree on the mountainside was a hot scent. A series of blazed trees spelled near success that ended in dreary failure. The appearance of Billy at Maraloolan on one occasion, dripping with water, gave rise to the conclusion that his find could only be reached by means of a swim underwater to a mysterious cavern. Diving suits and subterranean exploration then became the order of the day. None realised more than Billy that the true meaning of the old adage, silent is golden. To him it was more golden than gold. He wanted for nothing that a gold fever victim could supply him with, and there were many. The late Henry Moss of Nowra, a geologist and explorer of some attainments, had the confidence of Blue, and knew that he had nothing to tell of, save his own duplicity. Vainly Mr. Moss strove to delusion would-be seekers of the reef, but usually only succeeded in convincing them that he knew of the location and was endeavouring to put them off the scent. Down the years, gold hunters called in at the old inn and demanded the secret from the relatives of the late Mr. and Mrs. Moss, and always they have scorned the suggestion of the non-existence of the reef. It is safe to say that somewhere in the hills today, where the Shoalhaven winds its way, there are lonely hunters diligently searching, patiently hoping to find the lost El Dorado of Billy Blue, and that search will be carried on whilst ever red blood runs in Australian veins. So if you're a hardy outdoorsman or woman, and gold fever has bitten, you may yet strike it lucky. Billy's reef, if it did exist, was probably located in one of the eastern Shoalhaven River gullies, upstream from Fordham Canyon. Good luck.